Now everybody is familiar with the concept of mental illness, with whatever biased understanding that we have of what it entails. Right? Now, in the Indian context, the attitude towards the mentally ill is simply pathetic, to mildly put it. Here are some common statistics. 1 in 5 people are depressed. There's 56 million Indians who are diagnosed with depression, and another 38 million who are crippled with anxiety disorders. What's worse? Suicide. Suicidal attempts that are common by the passing hour is so common every day that it's almost scary to admit that it is becoming normalized in our society. Now, when we look at these statistics, our common reaction towards is sympathy. Yet, a crucial question that we need to consider is, what do we do except sympathize? Nothing. Most of us come up with whatever explanation that suits our values, our beliefs, and our perception of the society. Yet, why are we so reluctant in actually seeking out professional help and telling other people? The answer can be summarized in one statement. Our brains are hardwired to be lousy scientists, but make exceptional magicians. In other words, the answer lies in stereotypes. I'll come back and explain why I made that statement. Now, India is a country with diverse cultures, norms, attitudes, and values. So we know what stereotypes are. We know the negative effect it has on us and how it encroaches into our personal lives. We all know that stereotypes we are judged, we are labeled, and so we behave accordingly in certain situations. Right? Now, in the context of mental illness, for example, we have a fairly certain idea of what it is likely to be depressed, yet it remains a taboo topic in our family. Right? Now, when we say boys are better at math, that is the attributable skill, good at math, and the group, boys, and we come up with a stereotype, boys are better at math. It seems simple and really stupid, but that's how it actually works. All right? And now, what I am saying, as I'm saying all of this, you're all processing and storing into what cognitive psychology terms as mental schemas. Now, what are they? They are essentially representations of reality, and they help us make sense of the world around us. Now, why is this useful? Think of them as a bunch of files. What are files meant for? We categorize large amounts of information into different folders, and when we need them, we go back and look back because it's so definitely organized into different folders. Similarly, our brain categorizes information in terms of people, events, experiences, and practically anything from the world around us into these mental schemas. And right now, as you're hearing all of this, your brain is consciously, or unconsciously rather, creating and opening up this new mental schema of stereotypes. Now, this will guide and change how you think and perceive the world. And this is essentially how stereotypical behavior essentially emerges. Now, how are they actually formed, stereotypes, right? So Hamilton and Gifford, these two psychologists, claim that stereotypes are a result of illusory correlation. It's a fancy cognitive term for when people see a relationship between two variables, even when there's none. It might sound extremely absurd because how can someone possibly see a relationship when there is none, right? But essentially, if you look at this diagram, you're all Indians. We all know that the black cat, the familiar black cat and the bad luck story, right? Black cat, bad luck. There is no relationship between them. Yet we have come up with such a random association that if a black cat crosses your path, it brings you bad luck. Is there any rational basis to it? No. Precisely, this is how stereotypes are formed, and this is how they pervade in our society, and they are usually harmful, especially in terms of the Indian context. Right? Now, when I say these random associations and random connects, what I essentially mean is it is human tendency. So all of these statements, right, that have two seemingly unrelated variables, it is a result of what cognitive psychologists call cognitive bias, which is basically error in judgment. So every single of these statements have two variables that are not seemingly correlated, but in the minds of those classical stereotypes that we have, it is an extremely strong association which pervades in our society today and explains why India is like the way it is today. Now, when I say these random associations and random connects, right, it is human tendency to process whatever sensory information that we get and form random associations between them. All right, it's an extremely unconscious process because we humans do not like to spend too much energy on thinking. We are cognitive misers, and it's an evolutionary process because of which we are cognitive misers today. But Scott Fraser, a cognitive psychologist, also says that our brain abhors a vacuum. So as much as we hate spending too much time on thinking, we cannot stand it if there is an incomplete information from the information that we perceived. So now what does our brain do? From what we already know, which is from the mental schemas that I was talking about, and from what we already don't know, which is the gap that it forms, it is filled by other random information from what we already know. Alright? So this information is who you are, what your cultural affiliation is, what kind of experiences have shaped you as a person, and essentially all this is, this is an extremely unconscious process of forming false associations, right? Yet it ironically guides the most important behaviors. All of this is an example of stereotypical behavior. Now, to facilitate your understanding of whatever I just said, think about it this way. You see a girl yelling at someone who you perceive to be older than her. You perceive the girl, you perceive the older person, and you perceive that the tone that she is using to address the other person is disrespectful. Now, how do you know it's disrespectful? Your cultural affiliation, being Indians, tells you that, yelling at someone older than you is disrespectful. So you don't stop to bother thinking about why the person behaved the way she did. Nothing. All your brain does is associate that this person has yelled at someone older than her, so she's disrespectful. It takes one incident, one random observation to form a powerful stereotype. Right? Now, every time you see some, girls or kids around our age yell at someone who's older than us, what does your brain do? It's an unconscious process. The false association that you have forms a powerful stereotype. You think, oh my God, look at her. She's so disrespectful of the others. She has absolutely no regard for her. Isn't that what all of us think? Right? So, essentially, this is how stereotypes form. Now, for me, because I grew up in my family where I had no idea that I was depressed for the longest of time, at first mental illness to me seemed like a joke, right? Because I had no idea whether I was fine because I was fine or I wasn't fine. Now, I was diagnosed with scalp psoriasis. It's a skin disease that comes with a compelling condition where you cannot entertain too many negative emotions. Alright, so I was forced to control anger, frustration, sorrow, and all these kind of emotions, and I was persistently unsatisfied. I couldn't exactly snip my way through emotions, so I started forcing them under the carpet and I started brushing them aside. Alright, now I couldn't ever approach my parents because to them I was fine because my childhood dictated that my parents would never take me seriously. I couldn't approach my friends because I tried and they didn't exactly understand me. So it was a negative feedback loop of constantly brushing my feelings aside. I started becoming numb to emotions. I started reacting mechanically to things around me. And I even started entertaining suicidal thoughts. Now, the irony here is, rationality dictated to me that being suicidal is not remotely normal. But because of the strong influence of stereotypical thinking in my house, I didn't think beyond the fact that it is not normal. I entertained it as perfectly normal, and in fact, I lived in a constructed reality where I thought I was perfectly happy all the time. So I can't even blame my parents because obviously to them I was happy all the time. So the occasional emotional outburst that I had was a result of 10th grade stress or whatever. It was disregarded severely, right? And I obviously had no idea that I was depressed or whatever. I kept constantly brushing it aside. I used to question, why am I not feeling happy? Why am I not reacting to it a certain way? But I could never answer, and I could never construct and look beyond the boundary of normal or abnormal, if you want to call it. Right? And this is what it boiled down to. I knew that I wanted to talk to someone. I knew I wanted to approach someone, but I never could because I was scared of being judged. I was scared of being labeled. I was scared of being stigmatized. I was scared of being hurt and betrayed again. And this is my story, but I know a lot of my friends who have been through similar stories and who couldn't approach anyone because of similar incidences. And this is all thanks to stereotypes. Now, Stereotypes are a powerful phenomenon. If the enormity of how faulty our brain actually is has struck you, you will realize why I made that statement earlier. We observe phenomenally. We observe all the intricate details as scientists are expected to, but if we cannot make sense of the information, our brain does abracadabra, puts in some magic, fills in some information, and it's the most powerful stereotype in society. That's why I said our brains are hardwired to be lousy scientists but are exceptional magicians. Now, to overcome this stereotypical thinking, all it takes is to engage in reflective thinking. I'm pretty sure all of your English teachers here have taught you the 5 W's and 1 H, right? How, why, what, when, where. So if you're able to rationalize with yourself when you decide to behave towards someone you perceive to be mentally ill, your brain immediately dictates to you that you're supposed to averse from them and because you think that, I don't know, they're dangerous, they're crazy, they're stupid, they're retarded, whatever you think it is. If you take back a minute to actually rationalize with yourself, you will realize how irrational your brain actually is. It's not a fault of your brain, right? It's an extremely unconscious process. It is meant to help us organize large amounts of information and make meaningful connections. But if you stop for a moment and think about why, how, when, where, who, whatever, you will realize that it is not as bad as it seems. All it takes is a little love and support. Not to try and understand what they're going through, but to be there for them and make them feel loved, make them feel inclusive, and make them feel understood. This is what I lacked, and I know personally a lot of my friends here who lack the same thing, right? We are so scared of being judged and being understood that we go and, make irrational decisions, and I was this close to committing suicide, right? But, even it's the same with my friends, and I had to stop them. But otherwise, this is what it takes. But all it takes is a little love and support from your side. So it's not too much. It takes willpower to change how you think. But how you think will actually influence how the society works, and we can bring a change. So start by being the change. Thank you.